For most of human history, fire and water have existed as opposites. One consumes, the other extinguishes. Every natural law we understand insists that these two elements cannot coexist without conflict. And yet, in remote corners of the world, there are rivers where fire does not die. It floats, it flickers, it appears without sound, without heat strong enough to scar the water beneath it, and without leaving any physical trace behind. The first accounts of the burning river did not come from scientists. They came from travelers, from villagers, from people who lived close enough to the land to notice when something behaved incorrectly. They described water that released bubbles, not continuously, not violently, but in irregular pulses, and above those bubbles, flames would appear, small, thin, and silent, hovering briefly on the surface before vanishing as if nothing had happened. At a distance, the phenomenon looks almost harmless. There is no roaring fire, no thick smoke, no scorched banks. The river flows calmly, as it always has. Fish continue to swim. Vegetation along the shore remains green and undamaged. Birds drink from the water without hesitation. The environment shows no signs of distress, no evidence that combustion has taken place at all. And yet, the flames appear again and again. What makes this river unsettling is not the presence of fire, but the absence of consequences. Fire normally announces itself. It crackles, it radiates heat, it consumes oxygen. Here, it does none of those things. There is no sound, no hiss when water touches flame, no steam rising into the air. The fire exists visually, but not physically, as though it were obeying a different set of rules entirely. Observers who approach the river expecting danger are often confused by how ordinary everything feels. Standing at the bank, the water looks no different than any other slow-moving stream. The air carries the familiar smells of damp soil and vegetation. Insects hum continuously. Nothing warns you that the next flicker of light you see will be something that should not exist. Attempts to explain the burning river often begin with a familiar assumption: natural gas. Methane, released from underground pockets, can ignite under the right conditions. In some locations, this explanation works, but the burning river resists such simplicity. The flames do not align consistently with bubbling gas. They appear in places where no bubbles rise, and fail to appear where gas clearly escapes the water. Timing is irregular, location is inconsistent, cause and effect refuse to align. Even more disturbing is what the river does not do. It does not burn hotter over time. It does not spread. It does not escalate. The phenomenon does not grow, does not weaken, and does not resolve. It simply persists, appearing and disappearing without rhythm, without pattern, and without explanation. From the very beginning, the burning river challenges a basic assumption we rarely question: that nature must follow rules we already understand. Here, fire and water coexist quietly, not in conflict, but in indifference to one another. And that indifference is where the real mystery begins. As reports of the burning river accumulated, the focus shifted from disbelief to documentation. Those who returned to the site did not come with expectations of spectacle. They came expecting to observe a pattern. What they encountered instead was repetition without consistency. Flames appeared on calm days and on humid nights. They emerged during rainfall and during long dry stretches. Sometimes they lasted seconds. Occasionally they lingered just long enough to be mistaken for stability, only to vanish without warning. The most unsettling feature of these flames was their behavior at close range. When viewed from only a few meters away, they did not move like ordinary fire. They did not dance or bend noticeably with air currents. They appeared restrained, almost deliberate, as though limited to the water's surface by an unseen boundary. The flames did not spread outward. They did not leap from one point to another. Each ignition seemed isolated, unrelated to what came before or after. Observers expected heat. They expected discomfort. Instead, many reported standing close enough to see reflections of the flame on the water without feeling any noticeable temperature change. No warmth radiated toward the riverbank. No distortion shimmered in the air above the flame. When water was splashed directly onto the burning area, the flame disappeared instantly, only to reappear moments later somewhere else, untouched by the intervention. This behavior undermined one of the most basic assumptions about fire, that it is a process, not an image. Fire consumes fuel, releases energy, and leaves evidence behind, but the burning river offered no such evidence. No ash, no residue, no discoloration. The water beneath the flame continued flowing as if nothing had occurred. Even stones at the river's edge showed no signs of heating or scorching, despite repeated proximity to ignition. Environmental response was equally confusing. Insects flew through the light without hesitation. Fish swam beneath the surface where flames had appeared minutes earlier. Vegetation along the banks remained green and undamaged. Birds drank from the water at dawn, seemingly unaware that fire had hovered there the night before. If combustion was taking place, it left no footprint in the ecosystem. Efforts to record the phenomenon introduced a new problem. Flames did not cooperate with observation. Cameras positioned to capture one section of the river would record nothing for hours, only for flames to appear just outside the frame. When devices were moved, the phenomenon seemed to retreat again, never reacting directly to attention, but never aligning with it either. This created the impression not of avoidance, but of indifference. What made the burning river so difficult to understand was not its defiance of physics alone, but its refusal to behave dramatically. There was no escalation, no climax, no clear danger. The phenomenon existed in a quiet state of contradiction. Fire appeared where it should not, behaved unlike fire, and left behind nothing that could be studied after the fact. By this stage, the question had already begun to change. It was no longer simply why the river burned, but why it did so without consequence, why an event that should alter its surroundings instead passed through them unnoticed. As if reality itself briefly forgot how fire was supposed to work. As scientific interest deepened, attention turned toward the idea that the burning river might still fit within known natural explanations, even if its behavior seemed unusual. The most common proposal remained underground gas, particularly methane or other hydrocarbons seeping upward through fissures in the riverbed. In theory, such gases could ignite upon contact with air, but theory began to fracture when confronted with observation. In rivers where methane is responsible for surface flames, the behavior is typically consistent. Gas bubbles rise steadily from identifiable points. Ignition occurs directly above those vents. Flames burn until the gas supply weakens, often accompanied by audible popping, visible disturbance, or a noticeable smell. The burning river did none of these things. Gas bubbles appeared intermittently, sometimes in clusters, sometimes not at all. Flames often appeared where no bubbles had risen, and failed to appear where bubbling was clearly visible. Timing further complicated the picture. There were long periods when gas release was evident but no fire followed. At other times, flames appeared abruptly after hours of complete stillness. In some cases, the fire seemed delayed, igniting minutes after any visible disturbance had ceased. Cause and effect refused to align in any predictable way. Chemical sampling introduced more contradictions. Water collected from the river showed no consistent concentration of flammable compounds at the surface. Samples taken moments after a flame appeared were often indistinguishable from those taken hours later. Even sediment analysis failed to reveal a clear pattern of trapped gas pockets capable of sustaining repeated ignition. The riverbed appeared geologically ordinary, lacking the fractures or vents typically associated with persistent gas seepage. Attempts to provoke the phenomenon produced equally confusing results. When the water was disturbed deliberately, agitated, splashed, or temporarily diverted, flames did not respond. They neither intensified nor diminished. In many cases, deliberate interference coincided with complete inactivity, followed by renewed ignition only after the river had returned to its natural state. It was as if intervention erased the conditions required for the phenomenon, though those conditions themselves remained undefined. Perhaps most troubling was the lack of progression. If the burning river were driven by a finite underground source, its behavior should change over time. Gas reserves should weaken. Ignition points should migrate or disappear. Instead, the phenomenon persisted in a static state. It neither spread nor faded. Years of observation produced no clear trend toward escalation or resolution. This persistence without development challenged a fundamental expectation of natural systems, that they evolve. The burning river did not. It behaved as though locked into a narrow range of expression, repeating the same limited display indefinitely. Fire appeared, vanished, and left the river exactly as it had been before. By the end of this phase of investigation, many observers were forced to accept an uncomfortable conclusion. The phenomenon could not be fully dismissed as illusion or misinterpretation. Something was happening on the surface of the river that met the visual definition of fire, yet resisted every attempt to frame it as a chemical or geological process. The mystery was no longer whether the river burned. It was whether the concept of burning itself still applied. As conventional explanations weakened, attention shifted from chemistry and geology to the behavior of the phenomenon itself. If the burning river could not be understood by what fueled it, perhaps it could be understood by how it behaved. Patterns were sought not in substance, but in timing, location, and response to the environment. What emerged was not order, but restraint. The flames never behaved aggressively. They did not surge during storms, nor did they intensify during droughts. Rainfall failed to suppress them, yet prolonged dry periods did not amplify them either. Wind passed across the river without bending the flames noticeably. Even subtle changes in air pressure and humidity appeared irrelevant. The fire existed in a narrow, controlled state, neither reacting nor adapting to conditions that should have influenced it. Night observation introduced a further contradiction. Against darkness, the flames were more visible, yet no clearer in behavior. They did not brighten as oxygen cooled. They did not dim as moisture increased. Instead, they appeared as thin, quiet tongues of light, hovering just above the water's surface. Insects passed through them without hesitation. No audible cue accompanied their appearance or disappearance. Silence surrounded them completely. This silence became increasingly important. Fire is normally one of the loudest natural elements. Even a small flame produces sound, subtle crackling, faint movement, the interaction of heat with air. The burning river produced none. The absence was not subtle. It was total. Observers often describe the experience as visually convincing but sensorially incomplete, as though one sense had been excluded from the event. Heat measurements reinforced this unease. Instruments placed near the flame detected little to no temperature increase. Water beneath the flame showed no measurable warming. Stones at the river's edge remained cool. Even repeated exposure failed to produce cumulative heating. If energy was being released, it was doing so in a way that left no thermal footprint. Over time, long-term observation revealed something even stranger. The phenomenon did not seem to change with familiarity. Rivers shaped by natural forces tend to evolve. Channels shift, banks erode, behavior adapts. The burning river did none of these things. It did not learn. It did not decay. It did not respond to repeated exposure or extended scrutiny. Years of attention left it exactly as it had been at the start. This led to an unsettling shift in perspective. Instead of treating the flames as a process unfolding in time, some began to view them as an event repeating itself, over and over. Without accumulation, each ignition appeared complete and isolated, unconnected to the one before it. The river did not remember its own fire. The idea that fire could exist without consequence, without progression, and without interaction challenged more than physics. It challenged expectation. Nature is usually indifferent, but it is rarely unresponsive. The burning river appeared to exist in a narrow corridor of behavior. Constrained but persistent, visible yet unreachable by explanation. By this stage, the mystery had fully detached from the river itself. The water flowed as water always had. The forest remained unchanged. The environment carried on. The anomaly was not the place, but the rule being violated, and the rule was simple: fire should change things. Here, it did not. By the time observational data had reached its limits, the burning river had already begun to produce an effect beyond science. It was no longer only a question of explanation, but of endurance. Those who spent extended periods near the river described a gradual psychological shift. At first, the phenomenon demanded attention. Later, it resisted it, and eventually, it seemed to erode the very impulse to understand. The flames appeared too restrained to provoke fear, yet too persistent to be ignored. There was no danger to retreat from, no escalation that required intervention. The river offered no climax, no resolution. It existed in a state of perpetual contradiction, present enough to be undeniable, but passive enough to discourage urgency. Over time, this contradiction became exhausting. Observers reported a subtle loss of curiosity. After weeks of witnessing the same silent flicker, many found themselves watching without expectation. The flames no longer surprised them, but neither did they become normal. Instead, they occupied an uncomfortable middle ground, familiar, yet never explained. This psychological stagnation stood in contrast to most mysteries, which tend to either resolve or intensify. The burning river did neither. In the end, the burning river accomplished something rare. It did not challenge science by overwhelming it with complexity. It challenged science by offering simplicity without explanation. A flame, on water, silent, harmless, persistent, and uninterested in being understood. This may be why the river remains unresolved, not because it hides its secret too well, but because it offers nothing to grasp. It stands as a reminder that mystery does not always resist knowledge through violence or chaos. Sometimes, it does so through quiet repetition, unchanging, and unconcerned with whether it is ever explained. As direct investigation slowed, a quieter phase began, one defined not by discovery, but by long-term presence. The burning river was no longer approached as a problem to be solved, but as a condition to be endured. Those who remained near it did so without expectation. They observed not to extract answers, but to confirm continuity, and continuity was exactly what the river provided. Days passed without flame, followed by nights where light appeared briefly, then vanished. Weeks of inactivity were punctuated by moments of sudden ignition that offered no context. The phenomenon did not reward patience, nor did it punish neglect. It existed independently of the observer's schedule, immune to vigilance or fatigue. Over time, this unpredictability became predictable in its own way. What unsettled observers most during this phase was not what happened, but what failed to happen. There were no secondary effects, no gradual warming of the river, no alteration in water chemistry, no behavioral change in wildlife. Even prolonged observation failed to reveal subtle trends. The river did not accumulate evidence of its own anomaly. Each flame appeared as if for the first time, despite countless repetitions before it. This forced a reconsideration of what constituted an event. In most natural systems, events leave traces. They influence what follows. The burning river did not. Its flames were temporally isolated, disconnected from both past and future. This raised the possibility that the phenomenon was not a process unfolding over time, but a static condition expressing itself intermittently, like a fault line that never shifts, yet occasionally trembles. Attempts to impose meaning through symbolism followed naturally. Some began to describe the phenomenon as a boundary rather than an event, a visible reminder that not all natural processes are obligated to reveal their mechanisms. The river did not behave as a puzzle waiting to be solved. It behaved as something complete in its own obscurity. Historical parallels emerge. Ancient accounts from various cultures describe living waters that glowed or burned without destruction. These were often interpreted not as hazards, but as markers, places where the ordinary rules were suspended. While such accounts could not be verified, their similarity to modern descriptions of the burning river raised an uncomfortable possibility that the phenomenon was not new, only newly observed through a scientific lens that struggled to accommodate it. This raised a more troubling question. If the burning river had always existed, how many other anomalies had been dismissed simply because they did not conform to expected patterns? Science depends on reproducibility, but the river resisted replication. It could not be triggered on command. It could not be isolated. It could only be witnessed. And witnessing, without control, offered limited progress. Gradually, some researchers chose to withdraw, not because the phenomenon was disproven, but because it refused to engage. Equipment malfunctioned less than expected. Data logs showed nothing abnormal. Funding waned. Attention drifted. The river did not react to this retreat. Flames continued to appear, as they always had, indifferent to whether they were recorded or ignored. Some observers described a sense of detachment forming gradually. The river no longer felt threatening or even strange. It felt distant, as though operating in parallel with reality rather than within it. Standing at the bank, watching silent flames appear and disappear, produced an unsettling impression that the observer was irrelevant. The phenomenon did not acknowledge attention. It did not react to presence. It did not care whether it was seen. This indifference created a subtle erosion of agency. Normally, unexplained phenomena invite intervention, experimentation, escalation. The burning river invited none of these. Any attempt to interact, disturbing the water, approaching the flame, altering the environment, produced nothing of value. The phenomenon resumed unchanged the moment interference ceased. Over time, this led to a quiet withdrawal. Not a formal abandonment, but a gradual thinning of human presence. Camps were dismantled, observation schedules shortened, instruments were removed, the river returned to being a river, and the flames returned to being something that happened occasionally, without witnesses. And yet, absence did not end the phenomenon. Flames continued to appear, silently, on an unobserved surface. The burning river did not require recognition to exist. It did not need interpretation to persist. It simply was. This realization marked a turning point. The question was no longer whether the burning river could be explained, but whether explanation was even relevant. Some mysteries resist solution through complexity. Others resist through indifference. The burning river belonged firmly to the latter. In accepting this, observers were left with an unsettling thought: that nature does not always challenge understanding by hiding its mechanisms, but sometimes by displaying them in a form that refuses to behave like a mechanism at all. By the time most observers had withdrawn, the burning river entered its quietest phase, not because the phenomenon had diminished, but because attention had. With fewer people present, fewer records were kept. Flames appeared and vanished without documentation, as they likely had for decades before modern interest arrived. The river continued without witnesses, and in doing so, revealed something essential about the nature of the mystery itself. What remained were fragments, notes abandoned in field journals, isolated recordings that captured light without context, incomplete data sets that showed nothing unusual except the absence of correlation. Taken together, they did not form an answer. They formed a boundary, an outline of where understanding stopped being productive in retrospect. Some researchers began to question whether the burning river was ever meant to be approached as a solvable problem. Unlike phenomena that grow more defined under scrutiny, this one grew flatter. More observation did not sharpen its edges. It dulled them. The more closely it was examined, the less it seemed to offer in return. This led to a difficult reassessment of method. Science advances by isolating variables, by reproducing effects, by tracing causes to outcomes. The burning river resisted every one of these steps. It could not be isolated without vanishing. It could not be reproduced on demand. Its cause, if it had one, left no measurable trail. Faced with this, some concluded that the phenomenon occupied a category science was not well equipped to handle, a natural occurrence that expressed itself without transformation. There was also a growing awareness that the river's most unsettling feature might not be the fire at all, but the way it redefined expectation. Fire normally signifies change, destruction, warmth, danger, consumption. Here, it signified nothing beyond itself. It illuminated without consequence. It existed without narrative. It did not build toward an outcome. For those who had spent years near the river, this realization lingered longer than the flames themselves. Many reported that, long after leaving the site, the memory of the phenomenon resurfaced unexpectedly, not as fear, but as discomfort. The burning river had introduced a possibility that was difficult to discard: that some natural events do not participate in the logic of progression, resolution, or purpose. In time, the site faded from public attention, without dramatic escalation or tangible risk. It failed to compete with louder mysteries. Funding ended, media interest moved on. The burning river slipped back into obscurity, carrying its anomaly quietly beneath the forest canopy. Yet its legacy remained intact, not as a solved case, nor as a debunked illusion, but as a reminder of a rare category of mystery, one that does not resist explanation through complexity or danger, but through neutrality. The river did not confront humanity. It ignored it. And in that indifference, it posed a final, unsettling challenge. If nature can present phenomena that neither evolve nor explain themselves, then understanding may not always be a matter of intelligence or effort. Sometimes, it is simply a matter of limits. In the end, the burning river leaves behind no evidence, no damage, and no definitive explanation. It offers only memory, of light hovering where it should not, of fire behaving without heat, sound, or consequence. Once attention fades and observers withdraw, the river returns to anonymity, carrying its anomaly beneath moving water and dense canopy, unchanged by scrutiny. This is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the phenomenon, not that it violates known rules, but that it does so without drama. There is no catastrophe, no escalation, no clear danger to warn against. The river does not demand belief or disbelief. It simply exists, indifferent to interpretation. Flames appear, disappear, and leave nothing behind that can be measured, preserved, or analyzed after the fact. For science, this presents an uncomfortable truth. Knowledge progresses through accumulation, through traces, through effects, through changes left behind. The burning river refuses to accumulate. Each ignition stands alone, disconnected from those that came before and those that will follow. There is no narrative arc, no progression toward understanding, only repetition without development. For those who witnessed it directly, the experience often lingered long after they left, not as fear, but as uncertainty. The river introduced a question that could not be resolved by further effort. What if some natural phenomena are complete without explanation? What if not every anomaly exists to be solved, categorized, or reduced to mechanism? Throughout history, humans have relied on patterns to make sense of the world. We expect causes to produce effects. We expect fire to burn, water to extinguish, and natural systems to leave evidence of their behavior. The burning river quietly disrupts these expectations. It does not announce a new law of nature. It simply reveals that our existing ones may not be as universal as we assume. Perhaps the river is not a failure of understanding, but a reminder of scale. Nature is vast, layered, and older than any framework we use to describe it. Most of the time, it behaves in ways we can predict. Occasionally, it does not, and when that happens, the discomfort we feel may say more about our need for closure than about the phenomenon itself. The burning river continues to flow somewhere beyond observation. Flames still appear on its surface, silent and brief, whether anyone is there to witness them or not. It does not wait for explanation. It does not respond to attention. It simply persists, unchanged. And maybe that is its final message, that mystery does not always exist to be conquered. Sometimes, it exists to remind us that understanding has limits and that those limits are part of the natural world, not failures within it. If you found this story unsettling, intriguing, or quietly disturbing, consider subscribing to the channel. More unexplained phenomena await, each challenging what we think we know about history, nature, and reality itself. In the next episode, we will turn our attention to one of the most enduring mysteries of the ancient world, the origins of Stonehenge. Who built it? How was it constructed with such precision? And why, after thousands of years, do its true purpose and meaning remain uncertain? Subscribe now, and join us as we continue exploring the unanswered questions that still surround our world.